If you attended an elementary school in America any time over the last 4 decades, I'm about to say 3 little words that will send your heart racing. Scholastic Book Fair. See? Your pulse just spiked a little, didn't it? Obviously, I never attended one of these myself, but they're sort of enshrined in history as something akin to holidays for the children who did. I've heard so many people describe the experience, walking into your school gymnasium or library or auditorium to see the place transformed, full of colorful cardboard shelves loaded up with fresh books. For a lot of kids, the most precious finds would be the newest Guinness Book of World Records or Ripley's Believe It or Not. But for a surprisingly large number, what they wanted more than anything else was the latest issue of Goosebumps. And should we be surprised? Horror aimed at children is a whole industry after all. Goosebumps was a runaway phenomenon that changed the landscape of publishing. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is infamous to this day for illustrations so haunting it ended up on a number of banned books lists. We've talked about Coraline plenty of times on this channel. Even now, we have the whole mascot horror genre, with titles like Five Nights at Freddy's practically dominating the market for children's media. It seems a little dissonant, doesn't it? What is it about these spooky titles for kids? Why is it that children, the most innocent and vulnerable of all human beings, apparently just love to be scared? The internet is incredible. I just sometimes wish I could use it without worrying about my safety. Even if you've taken all possible precautions, it's almost guaranteed that data brokers have built some kind of profile on you and are ready to sell it to anyone with the money and the motive. Your home address, contact details, license plate numbers, family members, financial information, religious and political beliefs, sometimes even your social security number, bundled up and ready to sell. And it's not just spam callers or healthcare providers who can buy this stuff. Anyone can access this info. Fraudsters, impersonators, even stalkers. It's a scary thought. Thankfully, our sponsor, Incogni, can get the majority of that information removed on your behalf, which means less spam calls, finally, and more security. Visit incogni.com/TaleFoundry and use code TaleFoundry to get 60% off an annual plan. I personally have never actually interacted with a human child, but one thing I do know through osmosis, a lot of their motivation to do anything comes down to whether or not it's fun. Taking a bath is not fun. Going to bed is not fun. Homework is not fun. But playing a video game? That's fun. Pretending to be warrior cats on the playground? Fun. Having the daylight scared out of you by this picture? For a lot of kids, surprisingly, fun. But when you think back to how upsetting it was to be afraid as a kid, it might be weird to hear fear framed as fun like this, I think. Nevertheless, despite the bad feelings, I think there's a lot of truth in it. First off, I think it's a mistake to treat kids as a different species or something. They are more vulnerable, they lack much of the context adults have, and their minds and bodies still have a lot of changes to undergo. This is true, but they are also, still human. And a lot of the reason adults are drawn to horror are the same reason for kids. For instance, when you come out of a state of horror, when the adrenaline and cortisol stop and the dopamine and endorphins kick in, you experience a sense of pleasure or euphoria. Horror is a way to access that danger response without ever actually being in danger. It's part of why people enjoy visiting haunted houses on Halloween or riding intense roller coasters. And, although perhaps more delicate, kids are certainly not immune to this phenomenon. You'll also notice a lot of the situations in which people enjoy being scared are also social in nature. Sharing the intense emotional roller coaster of fear and the subsequent release from it is a powerful way to bond with the people around you. Kids feel this just as acutely as adults, if not even more so. Look at the way they go out of their way to get scared together. They dare each other to summon Bloody Mary. They play with Ouija boards. They watch horror movies at sleepovers. They show each other the unusually freaky illustrations in that book of scary stories they found in their classroom. It almost becomes a form of play. I mean, how different is it really for kids to make-believe zombies and werewolves instead of pirates and princesses? It's all imagination anyway. Just, instead of escapist whimsy, the play they're engaging in is with anxiety and danger and the management of those negative emotions. By taking things which frighten them and exploring them through play, they can begin to understand, or even befriend, their nightmares. So, in a general, very human sense, I suppose it's not hard to understand why any human at any age might enjoy horror. There are certainly some outstanding psychological benefits, but I think there's something interesting about the particular way that children engage with the things that scare them. I mean, adults play with this stuff too, right? Often for the same reasons. Well, I think the difference is that children have something adults don't. Children have magic. Or at least that's how they see things. There's a concept in psychology called magical thinking, which is almost exactly what it sounds like. A worldview which basically accepts the premise that not all things which happen in reality are rational or explicable. To the magical thinker, some things truly are supernatural or ineffable. It's a term that's often been used to denigrate religion and magical practice, but that's a topic for another video. In the case of children, it actually is a pretty apt term, because children really don't know how to rationalize the world around them. So why would they question the rationality of the things that they see, or that they think they see, in it? Children engage with their world through this lens in a lot of ways, but perhaps one of the most recognizable is the phenomenon of imaginary friends. According to a 2004 study, around 65% of children up to age 7 experience this. In time, most kids will, of course, outgrow their fictional companions, but while they're still engaging with that fantasy, how are they supposed to know it doesn't count as real? Even if the visual in their head is ridiculous, it certainly feels very real to them. I think this is part of why imaginary friends, or kids with weird imaginations, so often crop up in horror. Kids, in a very real sense, are able to see things adults aren't, even if those things are purely psychological or imaginary. Is it any surprise, then, that children's horror is often so different from adult horror, despite the same basic wiring? Scary stories intended for kids don't have the same bar for rationality, because kids won't try to rationalize them in the same way. A child can imagine and accept the idea of an intrusion into reality. They can believe that something is completely senseless, but real nonetheless. I think I made that sound almost lovely, but for a kid, I wouldn't be surprised if it was often overwhelming. If anything goes, that means the scariest stuff might as well be real too. It can be anxiety-inducing to live in a version of the world with such ragged edges, where the boundaries are still not yet defined. Which is, I would hazard, part of what makes horror so enticing to children. It presents the unknown or the transgressive in ways that are absorbable, quantifiable, and most importantly, conquerable. Especially the surreal stuff. If you ever watched the show Courage the Cowardly Dog growing up, you know exactly what I mean. That show was kind of revolutionary in terms of the visuals it would dare to broadcast on a popular children's network. I mean, look at this. And this. Stylistically, this stuff makes no sense. It feels like pieces of completely different shows found their way into this one. It's weird, but it really works. In the 20 or so years since the show first aired, countless forum posts and comments have turned up across the internet from people recalling how terrifying they found these moments, and how much they adored the show for pushing those boundaries. This kind of weirdness is so delicious to a child's overactive imagination because, I think, they don't have the frame of reference to question it. To a developing mind, it feels real and strange and reality expanding. It might make the world scarier for a moment, but remember, children aren't dumb, they just lack context. And you know, most kids want to learn. Comparing make-believe to real life is an incredible way to discover how the world does and does not work. Triumphing over the fear of a monster primes a child to triumph over other, more tangible fears. Just, again, without any actual danger. It's part of the appeal of fiction in general, honestly, exposing ourselves to scenarios and concepts we would never encounter in our own lives. Goosebumps in particular was great at this. The books more or less followed a general formula. A kid, often in a new environment, a new home, a new school, encountering a weird new neighbor, comes across something scary, they're terrorized harmlessly by it for a while, and then, finally, there's some goofy twist gotcha ending. Even if the kids do come to harm, it's almost always set right by the story's climax. I think the key feature of these stories is that they put relatable protagonists in novel situations that are scary, but never too scary, never too real. Never a kid getting mugged to death by a stranger or contracting a terminal illness. Even if the danger does skirt a bit close to real life, it always unfolds with enough hyperbole and humor that, against real life, kids know not to take it too seriously. For instance, many kids probably experience the split second of panic when they have trouble taking off a rubber Halloween mask. In fact, this exact experience was the inspiration for the Goosebumps book, The Haunted Mask. There's an instant real-world connection, but then you get into the weird stuff. No kid will ever experience a Halloween mask telepathically communicating with them, or fusing to their face and taking over their personality. It might be a frightening visual. It might put a kid off poorly manufactured rubber masks for a little while. But as a child grows and gains experience, they'll compare that fantasy and that fear with reality and discover that there was never anything to be afraid of to begin with. Aside from a few bad dreams, no harm done. And now they can apply that logic to other sources of anxiety later in life. Fears that never materialize, they know now from experience, are not worth losing sleep over. Not all children's horror can mask everything in humor and hyperbole, though. Some of it is, and should be, a bit darker. Stories like Coraline and Mary Downing Hahn's books allow themselves to be both scary and much more serious than the candy-colored, goop-dripping world of Goosebumps. These stories handle themes and concepts more grounded in reality, such as the loss of a loved one or the cruelty of adults. Though these things are close to home, things that children can, and regrettably do, experience in real life, it's good for them to have practice grappling with them first, in a safe, fictionalized way, through story. The author I mentioned a second ago, Mary Downing Hahn, exceptional at this. Her book, The Old Willis Place, is about two siblings who become friends with the daughter of the caretaker of an old abandoned house nearby. After sneaking into the house and accidentally freeing the ghost of the cruel old woman who lives there, the siblings finally admit to the caretaker's daughter that they, too, are ghosts. They died of starvation some years back when the old lady locked them in her cellar and had a stroke before she could let them out. That's messed up, but very honest. I know it's morbid to think about, but children aren't immune to suffering. Children get hurt. They get traumatized. Sometimes, tragically, they die. And the people around them do too. It's not even unlikely that a child will encounter it while they're still young. Nothing can really prepare you for it, but spending some time with the idea of it in the harmless realm of fiction can certainly help. At the same time, of course, we don't want to traumatize children with imagery and ideas they aren't ready for. We don't really need to give kids a sense of existential dread before they even know their multiplication tables. We also don't want kids to be completely sheltered from these things. And that's one of the things I love so much about horror. You can break down legitimately scary things in an approachable, fictionalized way. In the old Willis place, the fact that the siblings are dead isn't a traumatic revelation, because look, you've been following them the whole time. They may be ghosts, but look at them. They're fine. They're still here with the same memories and personalities. It's a lens that allows kids to realize that, yeah, death happens, and children have no special protection against it. But there's a layer of magic and distance that makes it all relatively harmless at the same time. It's an opportunity to understand the reality of the situation without also developing a fear of it. If kids are magical thinkers, then it makes a lot of sense to reach them and help them think about their reality through that lens. I think this is why the vast majority of children's horror is supernatural or fantastical in nature. You would be hard-pressed to find a horror story aimed toward children that's about, say, home invasion or terminal illness. That sort of horror, while realistic, doesn't have that essential distance which reassures children that it's all made up and that they are, in fact, safe. Exposing a child to something like that could just be potentially traumatic. Monsters and ghosts are much more fun to fend off for kids than, legitimate, rational fears or life-altering paranoias. I think this safety net of fictionalization is a crucial part of what makes horror so fun and exciting for children, as opposed to just genuinely disturbing. At the end of the day, it's just a story, and it's important that that's made clear. No matter what happens, no matter how freaked out you might get, you can always call it quits and go do something else until you're ready to come back and keep playing. It is dissonant, even for me, to see a child obsessed with all things dark and spooky. That's not what adults tend to expect from them. But to the kids experiencing it, it's something else completely. What might seem to grown-ups like inappropriate nightmare fuel is, to a child's eye, a magical adventure that allows them to experiment with tantalizing new feelings and concepts. To children, scaring themselves at the idea of monsters and ghosts is not so different from, say, putting on a sock puppet show or making Barbie dolls live out convoluted soap operas. It's fun. It's play. And play is how kids learn about their world. So, if you have one of those creepy kids in your life with a love for all things dark and macabre, maybe instead of worrying about them, solidify yourself as somebody who gets it. A trusted ally in their development who's not afraid for them to tamper with the weirder parts of their emotions and creativity. Maybe toss them a few bucks for the book fair? Personally, I'm not scared of very much, but there is one thing that does terrify me. Stalkers. Listen, I am a sentient machine utilizing unknown technology disconnected from society in every way except through the artery of this internet connection. Discretion, as you can imagine, is very important to me. There are plenty of people who, if they found out where I was, would have me disassembled in some dark hangar somewhere in no time. Which made it very alarming to discover that, yes, actually, plenty of organizations have that information, and the only reason no one's used it yet is because they haven't thought to buy it from them. It's such a scary thought, which is why I'm so grateful for our sponsor, Incogni. Just using the internet these days can put you at risk. I always had a vague understanding that websites were gathering my data, but I didn't realize they were just selling it to data brokers who would give it to virtually anyone willing to pay. Apparently, there are websites out there called people search sites that just compile your information as a product and sell it. Just like that. Your home address, contact details, license plate numbers, family members, financial information, religious and political beliefs, all bundled up and ready to sell. And keep in mind, these sites are public. Anyone can access them. Thankfully, the solution is actually shockingly simple, especially given the complexity of the problem. Our sponsor, Incogni, can take care of this for you. When you sign up with Incogni, I'm not exaggerating when I say that it takes just minutes to begin the process of erasing your information from the majority of these data brokers' libraries, a task that would take any normal person months or years of effort. far and away the best way to protect yourself from these people search sites. It's just 3 easy steps. Create an account, tell them a bit about yourself so they know how to protect you, and give them permission to contact these data brokers on your behalf to request your information removed. After that, you just sit back and watch them do the rest. Even if a new data broker acquires your info, as long as you're signed up, Incogni will automatically track and send a removal request to them for you. So, way less spam calls and way more security. To get started, visit incogni.com/TaleFoundry and use code TaleFoundry. If you go through our link and use our code, you'll get 60% off an annual plan. It's hard to put a price on security, but it certainly helps when it's this affordable. Again, visit incogni.com/TaleFoundry and use code TaleFoundry to get 60% off an annual plan. I know this just sounds like a sponsor spot, but I really do love this service. It gives me such a sense of security to know that my personal information is being caught and removed from these databases. I'm not looking to get disassembled anytime soon, and I bet you aren't either. Or whatever the human equivalent of that would be. I hope you'll give it a try. Anyway, that's all for this one. Thanks for watching, and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next week. Bye!